We are told that success is the pinnacle of human existence, that all of life's struggles, sacrifices, and sleepless nights will one day be redeemed in the shining light of achievement. But hidden beneath this promise lies a darker, more unsettling truth. For many of the most intelligent men in history, the moment of triumph was not followed by joy, but by emptiness. They reached the mountain's peak only to discover that nothing awaited them there but silence. Desire is the engine of ambition. It drives the artist to paint, the writer to suffer through pages of torment, the general to wage wars, the entrepreneur to take impossible risks. And yet, as Schopenhauer argued, desire is also suffering. To want is to be restless, to chase is to live in constant dissatisfaction. What few dare to admit is that success does not remove this suffering, it exposes its futility. When the chase ends, what remains is not satisfaction, but despair. History leaves us with haunting examples. Alexander the Great, after conquering the known world, wept because there were no more worlds left to conquer. Ernest Hemingway, who won both wealth and acclaim, descended into despair and self-destruction. Celebrities of our own age, seemingly in possession of everything society celebrates, wealth, beauty, recognition, speak openly of depression, addiction, or a sense of hollowness that nothing can fill. These are not failures of character, they are revelations about the human condition itself. The paradox of success is this: it promises liberation, but often delivers imprisonment. The intelligent man, unlike the masses, cannot distract himself with endless new desires once the old ones have been fulfilled. He sees through the illusion. He recognizes that the striving was the substance of life, and that its end feels like death. And so we are left with a disturbing question: is the loss of desire after success a tragic flaw, a kind of curse for the most reflective minds? Or is it, perhaps, the beginning of something far more profound? Could the death of desire be less a collapse and more an invitation to step beyond the illusions that bind humanity and to discover a truth that lies hidden in the silence of success? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that beneath the surface of all human action lies a single, unstoppable force: the will to live. It is not rational, not moral, not even conscious. It is blind, insatiable, and relentless. It pushes every creature, from the smallest insect to the greatest king, to cling to life, to fight for survival, and above all, to desire. Desire for wealth, desire for recognition, desire for power, desire for love. But for Schopenhauer, this will is not a blessing. It is a prison. Life, he argued, is nothing more than an endless cycle. We desire something, we suffer until we obtain it, and when we finally grasp it, the pleasure dissolves almost instantly into boredom. Soon after, a new desire emerges, and the cycle repeats itself again and again until death. This was, in his view, the great tragedy of existence, that happiness does not truly exist as a positive state, but only as the brief pause between suffering. To live is to desire is to suffer, and to stop desiring is to face the yawning abyss of meaninglessness. History offers chilling confirmation of his insight. Consider Alexander the Great, whose empire stretched across continents. After conquering lands that no man before him had touched, he fell into despair, lamenting that there were no worlds left to conquer. Or look to Napoleon, who rose from obscurity to rule Europe, only to die in bitter exile, haunted by what more could have been. These men lived out Schopenhauer's cycle with brutal clarity: desire, achievement, emptiness. But it is not only conquerors of the past who illustrate this philosophy. In our own age, we see the same pattern repeated in modern idols. The world's most celebrated actors, athletes, and musicians, people who seemingly possess everything, speak openly about their inner void. They describe how the applause fades, how trophies gather dust, how even immense wealth cannot silence the gnawing dissatisfaction within. Success, far from delivering them into happiness, exposes them to the futility Schopenhauer described with chilling precision. For the average man, the illusion holds longer. Daily life, with its constant needs and minor victories, distracts from the futility. The next paycheck, the next purchase, the next small ambition keeps the wheel spinning. But the intelligent man, the thinker, the visionary, the self-aware, cannot stay blind for long. He sees through the cycle. He recognizes that the will to live does not care for peace or fulfillment. It demands only more striving. And when he achieves what he once longed for, he faces a unique form of suffering, not the pain of desire, but the emptiness that comes when desire has nothing left to cling to. Schopenhauer's worldview is stark, even cruel, yet it explains why success so often collapses into despair. It is not that achievement itself is meaningless, but that the very structure of human existence is designed to prevent lasting satisfaction. Happiness is not a state to be obtained, but merely the shadow cast by the temporary absence of pain. Success, therefore, is not the end of suffering. It is the revelation of life's absurd repetition. And this is why the most intelligent men often feel cursed by their own clarity. They do not rejoice in their victories as others do. They see them for what they are, fleeting illusions in a game where the rules never change. The will to live keeps pushing, but the conscious mind begins to resist, questioning whether endless striving is truly worth it. It is at this crossroads that the paradox of success becomes unbearable. Success is often imagined as the final chapter of a long struggle, the triumphant moment when the restless striving of life finally ends. But psychology tells a different story. The human brain is not designed to rest in victory, it is designed to chase it. The science of desire reveals that the real power of achievement lies not in possession, but in pursuit. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most commonly associated with pleasure, is often misunderstood. We assume it surges when we finally hold the reward in our hands. In truth, dopamine peaks during the chase, during the anticipation of victory, not after it. Once the prize is obtained, the chemical high fades. What remains is silence, emptiness, and the restless search for a new goal to ignite the system again. This is why so many brilliant minds find themselves disillusioned after reaching what they once believed was the summit of life. The entrepreneur spends years building his company, sacrificing nights, relationships, and even health, only to sell it for millions and feel nothing but a dull ache of anticlimax. The artist pours every fiber of his being into a masterpiece, living in obsession until the final brushstroke is complete, then falls into depression, unable to find meaning without the struggle. The athlete who trains for decades to stand on an Olympic podium discovers, in the very moment of victory, that fulfillment slips through his fingers like smoke. Psychologists call this phenomenon the hedonic treadmill. No matter what we achieve, we return to a baseline of dissatisfaction. The mind adapts, the thrill fades, and the hunger returns. The treadmill never stops, because the brain evolved not for contentment, but for survival. Contentment breeds stagnation, desire ensures movement. What once felt impossible becomes normal, and the normal quickly becomes inadequate. For most people, distractions soften this realization. Daily responsibilities, constant stimuli, and social comparisons keep the cycle spinning without reflection. But intelligent men, those who examine their own inner workings, see through the illusion more quickly. They notice how joy vanishes after the finish line, how the taste of victory is sharp but fleeting. They recognize that what society sells as the pinnacle of success is little more than a temporary chemical trick, leaving behind a deeper emptiness once the thrill dissolves. This emptiness is not a flaw in the individual, nor a weakness of character. It is a predictable outcome of human psychology. The very mechanism that fuels ambition is designed to collapse the moment its object is obtained. What Schopenhauer described in philosophy, desire leading only to suffering, modern neuroscience and psychology confirm with data and experiments. The brain is structured for pursuit, not possession. And so, the paradox emerges. The more ambitious, the more intelligent, the more self-aware a man becomes, the sooner he realizes that the chase itself was the only source of fire. Once the finish line is crossed, he is left with nothing but ashes. The dream that once consumed him becomes another memory, and the cycle demands a new obsession to begin again. Here lies the great psychological tragedy of success. It does not bring closure, but a void. It forces us to confront the truth that fulfillment is not waiting at the end of ambition. It exists only in the restless striving itself, in the eternal chase that can never be finally satisfied. From the moment we are born, we are told a story. It is whispered in the classroom, repeated in advertisements, and cemented into the fabric of culture. Happiness awaits at the peak of achievement. Work hard, climb higher, win bigger, and at the top, fulfillment will be waiting like a prize that redeems all suffering. This story is not new. Ancient empires wove it into their mythology, promising soldiers glory if they conquered, farmers honor if they produced, rulers immortality if they built monuments that touched the sky. Today, it has taken on new forms, billboards glowing with luxury cars, commercials selling happiness in a bottle, motivational speeches assuring us that success is not only possible but guaranteed, if only we grind hard enough. The message is simple: once you arrive, you will finally be whole. Yet history whispers a different truth. The Roman emperors who controlled the known world often slipped into paranoia and despair. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, confessed in his meditations that worldly power brought no lasting peace. Napoleon, after carving his name into the continent, ended his life in exile, haunted by the futility of endless conquest. Billionaires of the modern age speak openly about depression, addiction, and the gnawing emptiness that follows once the game has been won. The summit, far from bringing completion, often reveals nothing but a barren horizon. Schopenhauer saw through this illusion with unflinching clarity. For him, the pursuit of happiness through success was one of humanity's greatest illusions. Life, he argued, is not structured to deliver lasting satisfaction. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place, and the chase begins again. Success does not cure the wound. It merely distracts from it until the distraction fades. And yet, consumer culture thrives on our refusal to accept this. Advertising works because it feeds the illusion of a permanent solution. This product, this lifestyle, this achievement will finally silence the restlessness inside. But the satisfaction fades almost as soon as it arrives. The car becomes ordinary. The house feels empty. The followers, once celebrated, are not enough. And so the cycle spins, powered by the treadmill of cultural propaganda. Social media has become the modern altar of this mythology. It transforms the endless chase into a public spectacle, rewarding those who appear happiest, most successful, most fulfilled. Behind the filtered smiles and curated milestones, however, lies the same emptiness Schopenhauer warned about. The intelligent man, who sees past the performance, recognizes the tragedy. Society is built upon the promise of lasting happiness, yet delivers only momentary highs that vanish like smoke. This recognition creates a dangerous kind of clarity. To see through the illusion is to rebel against the entire cultural framework. When an intelligent man loses desire after success, it is not a personal failure. It is a refusal to participate in the great deception. He realizes that the promises sold to him were never real. The luxury, the applause, the prestige, none of it could touch the deeper hunger at the core of existence. And this realization unsettles those who remain asleep in the dream. A man who refuses to keep climbing, who stops pretending that the summit holds salvation, threatens the very engine of society. For consumer culture cannot survive without endless striving. If too many saw through the illusion, the system would collapse. So the myth must be reinforced again and again. Keep climbing, keep consuming, keep chasing. But the intelligent man who sees through the facade begins to understand what Schopenhauer meant. The emptiness after success is not a mistake, it is a revelation. It is the moment the mask slips, and the truth of life's cycle is exposed. The loss of desire, then, is not weakness. It is the mind's rebellion against cultural lies. It is the refusal to believe that happiness can be manufactured, sold, or permanently secured at the peak of ambition. In this sense, emptiness is not merely despair, it is the first glimpse of freedom. What happens when the fire that once propelled a man forward suddenly dies? For most people, the chase never truly ends. They move from one ambition to another, clinging to the illusion of progress. But for the intelligent man who has climbed to the summit and discovered there is nothing there, a more haunting reality emerges. the collapse of desire leaves behind a vacuum. And into this vacuum rushes an existential crisis. Depression often strikes first. Not the depression born from failure, but the kind that follows success. The despair of realizing that even victory cannot silence the gnawing emptiness within. The businessman who sells his company for billions and suddenly finds himself incapable of joy. The artist who finishes the masterpiece that consumed his life, only to sit in silence afterward, paralyzed by the absence of purpose. The athlete who, after winning the ultimate championship, realizes the rest of life will never again match the intensity of that peak moment. Nihilism frequently follows. If desire was the great motivator of life, then its disappearance exposes a terrifying truth: nothing truly matters. The curtain has been pulled back, and the intelligent man sees existence for what Schopenhauer described: a pendulum swinging endlessly between pain and boredom. Pain when we strive, boredom when we achieve. And if both are unavoidable, what is left to live for? For some, the void becomes unbearable. Addiction creeps in as a desperate attempt to manufacture feeling where none remains. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, or even endless distractions. These are not pursuits of pleasure but escapes from the unbearable silence that follows the death of striving. Others withdraw entirely, abandoning the world that once celebrated them, retreating into solitude or obscurity, as if success had revealed not liberation but futility. History is littered with chilling examples. Ernest Hemingway, a man who captured the human struggle with unmatched brilliance, could not bear the silence after his creative fire dimmed. Kurt Cobain, at the peak of musical success, confessed in his suicide note that fame had stripped life of meaning. Even someone like Robin Williams, who brought laughter to millions, spoke openly about the crushing void behind the smile before taking his own life. Their stories remind us that success does not shield one from despair, it often accelerates it. And yet, within this crisis lies a strange and paradoxical possibility. For the first time, the intelligent man confronts life stripped bare of illusions. He sees that existence cannot be sustained by achievement alone, because achievement always fades. The collapse of desire, as devastating as it appears, forces him to ask deeper questions. If life is not about chasing the next summit, then what is it about? Schopenhauer's vision is undeniably bleak, yet it also contains the seed of transformation. The void is terrifying precisely because it is honest. When desire dies, one stands at a crossroads. Down one path lies despair, addiction, and self-destruction. Down the other lies the chance to build a new relationship with life, one not based on illusion, but on the acceptance of existence as it is. The existential crisis, then, is both dangerous and necessary. Dangerous, because it strips away the very fuel that once kept life in motion. Necessary, because it opens the possibility of discovering a form of living no longer tethered to the endless chase. It is here, in the silence after desire, that the first glimpse of genuine freedom begins to appear. If Schopenhauer was merciless in diagnosing the sickness of life, he was equally relentless in searching for its cure. He did not believe the intelligent man, once stripped of desire, was doomed only to despair. He argued instead that when the endless chase collapses, a door opens, not into nothingness, but into something higher. A new way of being that transcends the tyranny of striving. For Schopenhauer, the ordinary man remains enslaved to the will to live. He spends his days chasing wealth, love, power, or comfort, never stopping long enough to see the futility of his race. But the intelligent man, shattered by the emptiness of success, finds himself standing outside the prison walls. He realizes that the game was never worth playing, and in that realization lies the possibility of escape. But what does escape look like? Schopenhauer pointed toward art as the first gateway. Art, he believed, has the unique power to momentarily silence the will. In the act of creation, or in the contemplation of beauty, we step outside the cycle of desire and suffering. Music, above all, held a privileged place for him. While literature, painting, and sculpture represent aspects of reality, music speaks directly to the essence of existence itself. A symphony, for Schopenhauer, was not simply notes arranged in time, but a direct expression of the world's inner truth. To listen deeply was to glimpse, however briefly, a world beyond striving. History is filled with those who found in art not entertainment, but salvation. Beethoven, deaf and tormented, still produced works of staggering transcendence that seemed to rise above human suffering. Dostoevsky, condemned to death and reprieved at the last moment, poured his anguish into novels that explored the darkest corners of the human soul while hinting at redemption. These figures did not flee desire by denying life, but by transforming their despair into creation, turning personal void into universal meaning. Philosophy, too, became for Schopenhauer a form of escape. If art silenced the will through beauty, philosophy confronted it through truth. To reflect deeply on existence, to strip away illusions, was itself a liberation. In contemplation, the intelligent man is no longer a slave to blind striving but becomes a witness, detached, able to see life as it is without the constant compulsion to participate in its endless cycle. This is why Schopenhauer insisted that philosophy is not a luxury but a necessity for the disillusioned mind. It allows thought itself to become a sanctuary when desire has collapsed. But Schopenhauer went further still. For him, the ultimate escape lay in asceticism, the radical renunciation of desire altogether. He admired saints, mystics, and monks who denied themselves the pleasures of the world not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. In turning away from ambition, wealth, and sensual gratification, they rejected the will itself. In their solitude and discipline, Schopenhauer saw a kind of victory, a refusal to play the game of life on its cruel terms. Modern society often mocks such renunciation, branding it as escapism or futility. Yet countless examples reveal its enduring power. The hermit who retreats to the mountains and finds serenity in silence. The monk who renounces possessions but radiates a joy unknown to kings. Even in contemporary life, one sees echoes of this ascetic impulse. The writer who chooses obscurity over fame, the thinker who abandons careerism to live in quiet study, the artist who refuses commercial success in order to preserve authenticity. They are not running from life but stepping beyond it. This reframes the death of desire not as a tragedy but as a transformation. What appears at first to be emptiness is, in fact, space. Space where a different kind of life can emerge. No longer driven by restless ambition, the intelligent man is free to pursue what does not decay with possession: beauty, wisdom, and the transcendence that comes from turning inward. Schopenhauer's cure, then, is not about escaping life, but about transcending its illusions. Success may kill desire, but in that death lies an unexpected rebirth, the chance to live, not as a prisoner of the will, but as a witness to something greater. For the man who has seen through the hollowness of ambition, art, philosophy, and asceticism are not escapes from reality. They are portals to a deeper, freer existence. In Schopenhauer's time, the machinery of striving was driven by visible gears: status in society, wealth, recognition, and the unrelenting pursuit of survival. Today, the gears are hidden inside our pockets, glowing on screens, whispering through algorithms that never sleep. If the 19th century was ruled by ambition and commerce, the 21st is ruled by attention. Success is no longer measured solely by wealth or knowledge, but by visibility. Followers, likes, and the endless echo of digital applause create a new form of desire, more addictive, more insatiable, and perhaps more destructive than anything before. Modern culture leaves no room for the intelligent man to rest. Even after success has been won, after the book is written, the company built, the wealth secured, society demands a continuation of the race. Post a picture, prove you are happy, keep climbing higher. In this system, there is no arrival. The mountain peak becomes another base camp for the next ascent. For many, the death of desire is delayed not because they are content, but because the machine of culture refuses to allow silence. It keeps manufacturing hunger long after the soul has grown weary. Yet this is precisely why Schopenhauer's insights feel so urgent now. The emptiness that follows success is not a failure, but a signal that the cycle of striving has run its course, and that life is asking for a different form of meaning. In this recognition, The intelligent man or woman of today stands at a crossroads. One path leads back into the machinery, rebranding ambition in new ways, endlessly posting, endlessly performing. The other path is quieter, but infinitely more profound, the path of redefinition. Redefinition does not mean withdrawal from life altogether, but the courage to seek alternative sources of fulfillment. Creativity, for instance, becomes not a means to fame but a way of expressing truth. Spirituality, once dismissed as antiquated, emerges as a practice of grounding in an age of noise. Authentic living, choosing presence over performance, becomes a radical act of rebellion against a culture obsessed with appearances. And perhaps most powerful of all, service to others transforms life from self-centered striving into something communal, enduring, and deeply human. Examples of this shift already exist around us. The successful entrepreneur who, after selling his company, dedicates himself to environmental restoration. The artist who abandons the pursuit of galleries and instead teaches creativity to children. The public figure who steps away from the spotlight and discovers freedom in anonymity. These are not stories of failure, but of transformation. Individuals who refuse to keep feeding the machinery and instead turn their emptiness into a compass. For those who feel disillusioned after achievement, the message is not despair, but possibility. The collapse of desire is not the end of life's meaning, but the beginning of its reinvention. Schopenhauer's escape into art, philosophy, and asceticism was one answer. Today, each person must craft their own. Whether through creativity, spirituality, authenticity, or service, the path forward is not about striving for more, but about uncovering what matters when nothing left to chase can satisfy. In this way, Schopenhauer's shadow stretches into the present. His philosophy reminds us that the moment success leaves us hollow, we are standing on the threshold of something greater, the dangerous freedom of creating a life that is no longer defined by desire, but by meaning itself. We began with a paradox. The higher a man climbs, the more he sees that the summit is not an end, but another illusion. Schopenhauer's philosophy strips away the comforting lies we tell ourselves about success and progress. He does not celebrate achievement, nor does he flatter ambition. Instead, he whispers a darker truth, that success frees no one. It merely exposes the prison of desire more clearly, leaving the intelligent man staring at the iron bars of his own endless striving. For most, this realization is unbearable. They rush back into the noise of society, desperate to drown out the silence with new goals, new pleasures, new performances of meaning. But for a few, those who dare to look into the void without turning away, the collapse of desire becomes a threshold. It is the place where weakness can turn to strength, where disillusionment can become clarity. The absence of desire does not signal the end of life. It marks the beginning of something more dangerous. This is the dangerous freedom Schopenhauer left us with. A freedom stripped of illusions, where meaning is no longer dictated by culture, wealth, or applause. A freedom in which a man is no longer chained to the machinery of striving, but is forced to confront existence directly, naked and unadorned. It is terrifying precisely because it leaves no distractions. And yet, within that terror lies possibility, the chance to live without masks, without false promises, without the endless chase. Throughout history, those who have reached this state have often been misunderstood. They have been called hermits, eccentrics, even failures. But perhaps they are simply the ones who dared to step outside the illusions that bind the rest of us. In their solitude, in their refusal to continue the performance, they embody a kind of truth that society would rather ignore. The danger of this freedom is clear. Once desire dies, there are no scripts left to follow, no ladders to climb, no applause to chase. There is only life itself, raw and unmediated. But in that rawness lies the possibility of transcendence. And so we end where Schopenhauer began, with a haunting message that lingers long after the words fade. Success does not free us. It unmasks the prison we were too blind to see. And when desire dies, what remains is not emptiness, but the terrifying freedom to live without illusion.